Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being with us for this end of morning session. It's also the last major seminar session of this event, this edition of Les Rencontres économiques. The festival in Excel just started, the Festival Lyrique. So we'll talk about culture. I'm Raymond Kessler, president of the Channel 8 parliamentary channel, plus internet and social networks. Little advert while I'm here, and so it's a channel where the signature is give it sense, give it meaning, giving it meaning to the world we live in and to our existence. So welcome in this debate, which should help us set the scene of the challenges we're faced with in the cultural industry in a world where contents travel fast, where the digital platforms orient our choices, our tastes and everything, where you have identity issues. Can culture be a place of encountering, of going beyond one's individualistic positions? Can it be a mirror of what separates us, of what locks us inwards? So to talk about this, we have the best people, in particular Ted Hoffman, the new director of the Festival d'Aix-en-Provence, the Aix-en-Provence Festival. Go wild! Big applause, because he's taking control over this wonderful festival. So thank you for sharing with us here. I must say that at the Grand Théâtre de Provence, yesterday we saw a show, and I really recommend that you see Richard Strauss concert. It was remarkable, and I think we could take advantage of this opportunity to pay tribute to the performance, to thank the festival and the Paris Orchestra directed by Klaus Makeda. So everything, it's really great moments where the work, where the opus, where the interpretation is perfect. So, Ted Hoffman, you just took the head of the Aix-en-Provence Festival. It's the first time you direct an international institution, but you already have a rich experience and career. I saw that you fell in love with the X Festival in 2012 for when you attended for the first time. So I think there's a love relationship that you have with this festival. You directed Billy Butt by Benjamin Britten here in Aix-en-Provence last year. And sitting next to you, I was talking about yesterday in the Paris Orchestra, Sarah Connet, director of the Cité de la Musique, the Paris Philharmonic, in charge of the general coordination and public relations of the Philharmonic. And you have a double experience as a chef, a conductor, and a musician. And you have always striven and worked to open up art, this culture, to a new audience. People who are not used to these musical genres. I think you work with l'opéra comique also, and you trained 120 youth from 18 to 25 years, and you have other tools. Demos, for example, it's a youth orchestra for people who are coming from the suburbs. You also have singing sessions for the youth within the scope of the activities of the Cité de la Musique, Philharmonic, and Paris Orchestra. Mathieu Prédat, the founder of Delta Festival in Marseille. It will be on the 23rd of July, if I'm right, on the beaches of Le Prado. It's really a major rendezvous. I've talked to people in Marseille, they say they will all attend. You founded this Delta group when you were 24. You've been animating this festival, which is a major event in Marseille on the beaches, attended by 100,000 people each year. And you have organized also a Forum of the Possible. It's a debate that is linked with the cultural event. And there's also an economist on board this panel. C'est Natasha Valla, who's passionate for music, and she's the dean of the Management School of Sciences Po, the chairman of the Productivity Council. You were born in Marseille, so you're home here, and so we'll start by asking each of you to give us your appreciation of the topic, how you see it, and obviously you will have the opportunity to say how you, what you think of those cultural stakes. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you for being here. I'm very happy to be here because this topic is in my heart. I try to, at Sciences Po, to promote culture as a value for our society and everything. It's a pivotal topic here in our discussion. I think culture has its place in the rencontre économique tech. So we are in a phase of the technological revolution that changes the setting for culture. We went from a world where we had broadcasting channels with the publishers, for example, for books. We had media, critiques, or institutions that really had the ownership over the criticism and everything. And we went from that to a world of platforms. I think in the backdrop of all this, there's the economy of the attention. Remember with the President Arte, which theorized all this very well. So we have recommendations based on algorithms, the viralness of the topics, with a renewed way of distributing all this information. How major institutions perceive culture. I'm thinking about the EC that published a report in 2026. I'm talking about the intellectual property also that did a report on music. 68% of revenues related to music come from streaming. And we have a new issue with the cultural value, which is no longer linked to the degree of creativity or creation, but on the discoverability. It means how you are discovered on the platform. So really stake for the cultural policies and for our civilization. I attended some performances in Paris, and I was very happy to see that the Conservatory of Paris was in the room to find new talents. Not everything follows algorithms. There is still a human presence to identify new talents and everything, and at least there's a human sensitivity that's involved. The polarization is another word that we'll use in our discussions, how we measure all this, because as economists we measure things, maybe sometimes trivially. We tend to calculate everything on the basis of the GDP, and so we know to measure the income from the cultural activities, the impact of intangibles like culture and everything in the commercial balance. But what we haven't managed to measure, whether economically or financially, is social cohesion, the influence of culture in the social cohesion. So we can't measure the impact on mental health, for example, for the people who make culture, but those who attend the different events. We can't measure the impact of culture on the attractiveness of the territories. We don't have the tools for that yet. And another thing we can't measure is the geopolitical dimension of culture. And I'm thinking soft power, for example. So there's a gap here. Should we measure all this? We can discuss about that. But if we want to attract financiers, funders, and everything, I think it could be a very useful tool. We work intensely on that at Sciences Po, Political Sciences. We sent a group of students at the Châtelet Theatre to measure the impact of the programming in terms of euros, in terms of income and financial impact, and editorializing. It's also okay. Should we leave the algorithms aside? So some people have chosen to steer clear from algorithms in the editorial line that you find on certain channels like YouTube would do. So I will stop here. Of course, we will have discussions after this first round table. You can all react to the comments here. So, Telefman, I think you will take the floor in English to better express your ideas, but you do speak French and understand French. So, for those who need a translation, it's channel 2 on your little devices that you will pick up at the entrance of this room. So the X Festival is proposing 45 shows, 5 operas, 16 concerts and recitals. In several interviews, you expressed your will to reinvent the way of proposing the opera, redefining it to open that up to new audiences. Do you feel a pressure, including in this field of the opera, of classical music, kind of globalization and economic pressure that is trying to standardize the works, and a pressure from algorithms that impose certain numbers of standards, excluding others, or do you use as a rule to maintain a space of sheer creativity, which is steering clear from these algorithms that Natasha mentioned? So how do you understand your role, perceive your role here in Aix-en-Provence? Thank you, and good morning, everybody.
Is in a particular place in the world because opera has always been threatened by financial questions and by questions of the past and the present and the future. And so I think this is this question of what's happening in our digital age and with algorithms. I think that we represent in our culture a rare and precious place where at its best creativity is encouraged to the maximum, and where people can come and experience something profound, sitting together, listening together. It's an art form which is based on this very fragile and beautiful thing of a human voice speaking to thousands of people at the same time, and I think that makes opera very emotional for people, and opera is also the place where you have every kind of art form all in one. So you have theater, working with music, working with art, working with dance, and it's always been that. And what that means is that we attach formal ideas to ideas about our society and storytelling, and it's a very specific place that we occupy. And I think for that it can be mystifying for a lot of people. There are many codes that have built up over 400 years of creating opera, and so for us it's about teaching the audience those codes and also maybe changing those codes, changing those codes. So for me, the way to avoid this kind of move towards standardization or uniformization is uniformity. Sorry, I start to speak in half French, half English. I think it's always to push for innovation, to encourage creation and new work, to encourage young talent, and then to make this art form accessible to more people. And of course we can use new means, we can use new technologies to make it more accessible, but I don't think that at the heart of what we do it will ever change, because I think that sitting in a room with thousands of people who come from very different places, who have maybe very different ways of thinking about the world, who cover the entire political spectrum, which is again a real rarity. It's a place of listening to one another in a profound way, and it's not about quick sound bites. It's not about a quick joy. Hopefully, it's about a 4-hour joy sometimes, like last night. But I think that makes opera a very unique place in the world, and I think we have to defend it. It's always been outside of the market, and we can make adaptations now towards lighter forms, and of course this is already going on, where we're asking ourselves, can we make things which still reach an operatic public, but don't cost as much, because of course the pieces that we're presenting were made in very different financial circumstances, and so now we have to adapt to today. But I think we have an amazing heritage to bring forward. So for me, it's about continuing this amazing heritage and sharing with our audiences the culture that we've inherited, but also pushing that culture forward and being part of the ideas that push our society forward. Because I think for opera we have to redefine ourselves as the place where new ideas are made and tested and pushed. And in fact, this is what theater has done, since ancient Greece. But I think we've become maybe too close to the market in that sense.
Merci Ted.
Thank you, Ted, for this first approach. So don't give everything to the market, and that's what your colleagues think, I think. And you also are working at attracting a new audience. How can you use new technologies, and how can you use this algorithmic tool to make sure that your productions are more easily discovered. So Sarah Koné, before we have a discussion, in 2025, the Philharmonic Orchestra had 1.6 million visitors. It's a historical record. So it means it worked. You're broadening your audience for concerts, exhibits. I'm thinking of the Demos program, which is an orchestra program for disabled youth, existing with Exister avec la voix ensemble. Same things for choral groups or singers, for singing. Do you think you've managed to pull classical music outside of an elitist world, let's say? Because it's true that in the mainstream of cultural consumption, it's not the Philharmonic that comes on top. Have we succeeded? Well, I think that without sort of like freezing things, I think the answer is yes. Our Director General likes to say that this is historical success at the Paris Philharmonic took place on the year of the Boulez anniversary, very demanding period with contemporary programming. So I think yes, the project of making culture more democratic works, and yet more so when it doesn't devalue the artistic quality, when we're in the capacity of proposing a good reading of a very demanding delivery, if I may say so. We can always fight, us programmers, us creators, against algorithms, but algorithms are also prescribed by the economy, by the means we give to culture, and it's a tool to help us continue to discover new talents and creation. And it's true that with the scarceness of resources, we tend, we're certainly right, to develop together collective objects that should please or a larger number. Of course, these products, cover the world, Europe and everything, and they create a certain kind of standardization of the artistic proposal. And what we want to do at the Philharmonic, in parallel to these great movements, because we have to collectively look for the resources, I think what we can do is to encourage the emergence of artistic creation and not fear polarization. Polarization leads to turning back to oneself inward-looking attitudes, and we have to be careful. We have to guarantee that we'll let creators to take risks or be bold. And I like to also talk about something that is far from the economy. In 16th century, when the violin was created in Europe, other instruments which were very close to the violin, which appear in India, in the Middle East, in Iran, and a little bit everywhere in the world. While at that time, the society wasn't polarized as it is today. We didn't have the communication networks that we had. So we can hope that works can be can be created globally without the communication systems acting as speeding factor.
Does it mean that there's a hybridation, or rather that we can have the birth of new things at once, spontaneously? It seems that we are an era of mainstream culture. Well, I was talking about rather niche cultures, but what we have set up at the Museum of Music, because the Philharmony is actually a museum of music, we saw that some new instruments were born spontaneously all at once in different areas and far away from us, and that allows us to take some distance with the paradigm and to approach the creativity of creation. So we have Mathieu Prédal, who has the biggest youth forum, and there are two events at once. So you are the heart of this issue of standardization, or inward-looking community attitude. We are seeing both phenomena in terms of productions that need to be broadcast everywhere, that look alike, and that we're going to find in all festivals, because we think that this is what the younger ones have listened to on Spotify, and we need to have that. And festivals that are very highly specialized with metal music fans, because we had the fest recently, but there are many others. So how do you address your role, and how do you face and grapple with the challenges in terms of musical consumption and the polarization, because we're part and parcel of the same community and we don't always dialogue with the others? Thank you. I would like to thank the Cercle for giving me the opportunity to speak, because we are at the very heart of this subject of culture. With Delta Festival, we created a massive event. We should have up to 50,000 people. And we wanted to have a cultural musical event with a lot of artists on stage from different backgrounds. And what we wanted to have is a forum, Le Monde des Possibles, the world of everything that is possible. 350 NGOs, local authorities, public services, startups, large corporations that will convey a message to the youth. So, with a cultural event like ours, we want to try to convey messages, have a social and societal impact, and launch initiatives by the youth for the youth. And these two events are very important. I have the heart of a culture entrepreneur. Today, we have consumption in behaviors on the part of the youth, where they try to be in bubbles, in community bubbles. And this is also fostered by social networks. It seems that we are pushed towards our own silo, and nobody helps us discover new things and different things and varied things. And this is what you've talked about. You've talked about the Health Fest, which is a highly specialized festival is for metal music. For those of you who might not know the Hellfest, I didn't go this year because I'm a fan of metal, but if I went there, is I wanted to see how they would succeed in such a magnificent project. And we see that those that go there, they want to listen to their music, stay in their universe. Even if they discover new artists, it is the same universe. What we want to do is something that is more general. We want electro fans to meet rap fans and reggae fans. And so they can discuss with one another, challenge one another, and open up and not be inward looking. And that's important to fight against inward-looking communities. We also see a lot of festivals that are being redeemed by large corporations because we are so much subjugated to market law that if we don't have a large, big corporation to help us to strike even, I'm not even talking about making profits, but just to strike even, to make sure that we can have a social impact in the rural areas, then it's not viable. And with this uniformization, we can sustain an offering. And the objective of festivals will not be reached, namely to help prompt cultural diversity. We are a product of this. This is what we want. We don't want to be subjugated to the law of the market, to supply and demand. We want to prompt diversity. And this is a debate that should be fed and nurtured. The law of the market law should not be the silver bullet. So we have to resist. Of course, a round of applause for those who want. We have to fight against the pressure from the market law to make sure that we have cultural diversity. Yes, indeed. We often read that festivals are too much subsidized. They are often too much financially assisted. With Delta, we stand at 3% of public funding, and it is only geared towards general and common interests. It's not geared towards the musicians and artists. We can't say that they are over-subsidized or they rely too heavily on public subsidies. If we want festivals to have a social role, we need to have prices that are set where concerts can rise up to 100 and 300 euros a seat. We can't have tickets that are too high. Otherwise, we'll have a problem with the consumers. We can't ask too much from public services on the one hand, and yet we cannot have prices that are too high to be able to respect our social model, our business model, well, social model. So we are a bit at a stranglehold. So you also have private investors, and this is how you fund most of your festival. Yeah, 60% comes from ticket sales, 30% transformation, and 10% sponsors. It's important to have your outlook on the debate on public subsidizing of culture. We know that for an opera it's very difficult to have profits. The more representations we have and the less profitable it is because each production is very costly. I think in the US we don't have this debate because there's no public spending. It's sponsors that actually pay for this. What is your outlook on the French culture? And now that you're in Aix, you might need the French local authorities because you need to escape from the market law, globalization and pressures from algorithms and the production led by consumption criteria. What is your take on the debate relating to public subsidizing the culture?
All the operas, the 50 operas and orchestras in France who also work with the Force Musicale, we all know that there is a risk to our public subsidies, and as I said, I think we have to speak to the public about why it's so necessary to have the access to this culture. Opera is expensive, and it's always been expensive, and it's always struggled to find the way it's been financed through lots of private individuals, through companies, through public financing. I guess I can come to you as an emissary from the United States and say what you have is quite precious, and that is that I think here there's an understanding that culture belongs to the society, and it is a right of the society, and it is also essential for democracy and for dialogue and for the exploration of ideas. And so I think to the entreprises that are here today, I would say those of you who have who support other social causes, I really believe that music and not just opera, but music education, it's essential for us to continue this heritage that we have, and it is in danger, and we see what happens when it goes away, and the reason I came to work in Europe, or one reason, is because the level of creativity here, the level of public support and understanding for the arts is so at such a high level, and so I would encourage you to run from the American model and keep and fight for the amazing system that you have here in France.
Vous pensez que la culture...
You think that culture is really threatened in the US now under the administration of Trump?
There is that because public funding is virtually non-existent, we see a much greater level of uniformization, uniformity and standardization, and there's the ecosystem for innovation is much poorer there, and so I think we have to acknowledge that is the trade-off, that if you remove public subsidies, then innovation and creativity suffer, and it's a very equal, very clear equation.
Sarah Koné,
Sarah Koné, what is your public spending reliance? How dependent are you? What is your take on this? We'll talk with Natasha later, but we have to recall that we have local authorities in France that have completely discontinued their subsidies in Pays de Loire, for instance. They have discontinued subsidizing culture. In Montpellier, there was an interview with Art 360 saying that subsidizing culture is a way to rebel and defend culture. It's important. Well, we have the town of Paris and the state, which are our umbrella authorities, even though, as for the others, we have gradually changed our sponsorship model. And over the last 5 years, we have developed sponsorship with the Philharmonie. We have to be demanding with our umbrella ministries and authorities subsidizing us because, of course, everything is highly political. Everything is aimed at educating as well. We need to continue prompting the imagination and fostering the imagination of people. This will help us defend, if we still have it, the specific features of the French models. I think we have a common important responsibility. We need to wake up the future generation, the future viewership, and we need to make sure that we shouldn't abandon culture, and the state is also responsible. So Nathalie Chavala, with 3 other economists at the request of Matignon, you're going to work on the budget framework for 2027. The Minister of Culture was saying that she was going to try to get some money. We thought that she was not feisty enough, that she did not display enough grit. So we fear that the cultural budget will be on the sideline, and there's a risk of uniformization, as pointed out by Ted earlier on. Well, we have to be very feisty to try to fight for it. But we have to be candid about this, because I'm not saying that this will be the central scenario, but it's highly likely that this will happen on the short run. This is a preliminary observation without talking about other political scenario, namely because everything depends and might depend on the political campaign and the elections. I totally concur with everything that has been said so far by all of you, but if we have a political power that considers that culture is not important, then just in keeping with Pays de Loire, the cultural budget will be squeezed out if we increase the defense budget, if we increase and need to allocate billions of euros to other priorities, then of course culture will disappear. So it's a matter of common responsibility. The world of culture, we've seen what happened in the US. We need to anticipate with crisis plans. What do we do if the cultural budget is divided by half? And that could happen because with our future budget laws, from one year to another, we have to change. I mean, so it's a risk. It's a real concrete risk. And the idea of sponsorship was mentioned, and it is very telling. I think that institutions are mobilized. They know that sponsors can help diversify funding of culture, and it is helpful. But the mindset is not there yet. I'm thinking about small personal efforts to try to help this institution. We can say that 20 big corps, and we're gonna knock at their door, and maybe this will be included in their budget. And I think we need to have tax incentives that could actually change the game. But it has also a budgetary cost. We can talk about budgets, we can make sophisticated calculation, but in any case, down the road, it's a matter of collective responsibility. What would happen with culture if overnight, from one year to another, the cultural budget would be completely squeezed out? Well, I think we have to measure the efficiency of measures that are implemented, because if we have someone winning the elections that will be against culture, we should see what impact it can have, because we can't compare Rihanna to Francesco Filidei, for instance. The idea is to try to have KPIs. Well, we have to see that if the public power tries to measure the profitability of a cultural event, there's a problem, because there's also a political message that is conveyed by the cultural institutions. And we have to make sure that extreme political parties will not favor one cultural event to the detriment of others. The thing is, we don't have KPIs. We don't have benchmarks. What about the successful rate of A-levels, brevet des collèges, and secondary school qualifications? What impact music and culture can have on this? We can say it has an intrinsic value. For me, so that public authorities can understand that, so that we can justify this, we can demonstrate its value to the public authorities. And if we can't measure it, then we're all everything is blurred. Do you want to add something?
We've also measured the economic impact that a festival like ours has on the region, and it brings an enormous amount of money to the region. But at the same time, I think we who work in culture, I don't think we should rely on that kind of logic to support why we have the arts in our culture. So I think it's a dangerous place to go, in a sense.
Mathieu.
Matthew, I totally agree with what you've said. We should give the tools to the political decision makers to support culture. Valuation is important, but we have to be careful of not pitting the niche culture against the mainstream culture, because we're complementary. We need both, indeed. And we shouldn't be afraid of measurements, because we need to find the right KPIs. And your indicators may not be the same as ours. And this is what we have to work on and spark a debate with the state, with the government agencies, see what kind of social, intellectual, healthcare impact we can have. This is just my food for thought, my input, because our festival will try to look for mainstream music, but also different musical backgrounds as well. We'll try to be as attractive as possible, because we want to impact thousands on young people and talk about entrepreneurship, healthcare, and so many other subjects as well. I would like to give you the floor because I promised it. Does someone want to raise their hands, react, or ask a question? Please introduce yourself briefly so we can actually have a Q&A. Don't hesitate to raise your hand. Of course, it's hot. Maybe you're not as responsive as you could be, but you have the director of the opera, of the Festival of Aix, the Philharmonie of Paris, the best of the best, the crème de la crème is here.
Hello, Perence Berez, former European elected representative. I was president of an orchestra, the Force Majeure, decarbonated group, which does tours riding a bicycle. Yes, on bicycle. You should visit our site, les Forces Majeures. Go back on this question of indicators. In my long career, I was the president of the Monetary and Economic Commission and Social Affairs at the Parliament, the European Parliament, and I realized that one of the mistakes in social matters is we didn't have the right indicators. We had aging indicators on housing problems, indicators that are 5 years old, and on financial sides we have quarterly indicators. So the question for you is really a strategic question. But we can't say that for the opera, €1 equals so much return on investment, because the cost of an opera, there's a multiplier effect, major multiplier effect. So the question is, how can you define correctly these indicators so that they can be useful and understandable and can fuel our debate here, the role of culture to defend the so-called democracy and living together. How are these criteria defended? Are you trying to measure quantitatively what is an added value that's qualitative? And so there's a limit. So who wants to take up this question? Natasha, do you want to? This debate is launched, so I think the work is not done, but it's a starting point. It's the reflection we should have. Now, qualitative, quantitative, it's all one artifact, because we have methods to manage qualitative indicators that are very efficient to withdraw information. But we're trying to express, it was true when we talked about this financial standards, we're trying to express values. We give a value to something. And when we did all the work, and Pervenche knows that very well, the work on extra financial indicators for the environment, it was a battle, an everyday battle. we tried to say what was important for us collectively. We were a little late for biodiversity, so there's a second train for biodiversity, but collectively we managed to say, yes, it's important to us. We could have had a similar discussion on that for biodiversity. So now I think we have to move ahead for culture to awaken people for what cannot be measured qualitatively or quantitatively. Is there another question? Yes, madam, on the front row, who was at the Théâtre de Provence yesterday. Yes, if you had there are tickets left, just go and get them. I'd like to know how Ted Hoffman talks to someone who's never attended the opera, and how he said come for the first time, knowing that yesterday it was fantastic. It was directed extraordinarily well. It's 4 hours long. The booklet is a Nomenstadt booklet, and it's difficult, it's complex, and difficult to understand even with French subtitles. And related to the enchanted flute that we seen the day before, it's high music. We love high music, but imagine that my nephew has never been to the opera, and you're talking to him and you say, come. What do you say? How do you convince this young nephew to come? Great question.
It's a great question. I don't think anyone has ever described Frau ohne Schatten as a starter opera. But at the same time, I would say one of the things that I'm most proud of that the festival does is through Passerelle, which is our action culturelle. We bring students, we bring people who historically haven't had access to opera to rehearsals, and we do a program of education throughout the whole year. So we start with them in November, December, and we take them. So we teach them about the music, about the story, about how a set's constructed, and to see young people start to understand what goes into this, and to start to see themselves in it, and understand how these stories might relate to them. And when they start humming the music themselves, then I think we know we've reached something quite special. And they come, and so you have people who've never been to an opera every year who come and sit in two rehearsals. So thousands and thousands of people who come to our final rehearsals get to see the full show. So I guess I would say to your daughter, that was the question? Yeah, I would say first I would encourage her to get to know the piece a little bit before. So just like she would know the songs of her favorite band or her favorite performer, come with the knowledge if you can, if that's possible, and otherwise I would say maybe start with an opera that has a slightly easier libretto, but I think there's also, we don't have to coddle people too much. I think people who are exposed to opera, and it sounds basic, but I think accessibility is the thing, and also if we make our stages more diverse and more inclusive, a larger group of people are going to see themselves in this work. And I think that opera historically has had a problem of being in a particular kind of silo and closed off, and I think that part of that is our job to open opera to in what we produce, but also in how we make it accessible. And I would say that the opera is quite diverse. And there are things that will please some people and won't please other people, and every music is the same. And I also.
Oui, faut un micro.
What is the Beatles of opera, in fact?
Sorry?
Who is the Beatles of opera? What is the first opera you should
Qui sont les
propose?
Beatles de l'opéra? Who are the Beatles from
What
the
is
opera?
the first opera?
Les Beatles.
Ah, pardon.
Peut-être la flûte enchantée, non? Je sais pas. Soit. Voilà.
Ouais.
Maybe the enchanted flute.
Qui plaise à un grand public aussi, mais.
Yeah, there's some works that attract a larger audience, but think we have different kind of exchanges depending on our aesthetics, and I think it's creation that can help us do this. But if we only talk about the past, it will stay in the silos, you know. So Sarah wants to add something. No, it's true that by creating the maîtrise populaire, your question was my first question. I must say that the voice is the most democratic tool or instrument that exists, and the opera, even if it's very demanding, what we saw yesterday for 4 hours is still shorter than all the narratives of video games. We can spend hours, you know, immersed in wonderful worlds. I think it's a question of social code. Once you have the answers to a few enigma, it's easy to access, and I'm convinced that it's through practice, exposure, that we enter this world. I think we have to stage and ensure the accessibility to a certain public of these secret codes behind the scene that we have to share with a large number. Mathieu, one word and maybe two questions that I would have to address. Yes, like to make a parallel with us. So we don't do opera at the Delta Festival, but nevertheless, we try to open up the silos. And when in our pro-insertion program, we reach about 300 youth who come from low-income neighborhoods, audiences that don't really have access to culture, and the product of the festival for them does not attract them. We invite them to say, you're lucky to come to the festival free of charge, you will meet artists and all kinds of things, but the festival product they're not interested in. It doesn't attract them. It's not, because culturally it's not a product they will turn to. They have other cultural practices, but the festival product doesn't like it. You talked about your young nephew who's not attracted by opera. They're human beings like you and me. So they have their own cultural practices. How do you go around that? Well, we have annual programs, a bit like you. We go to these audiences, develop a relationship of trust. We let them come to us, and it's up to us to adapt and to accept that the contents they'll be interested in are also present in our event. It's not always going downwards. It has to be horizontally addressed, and there's a lot of pedagogy involved here, year-round, to explain, and it takes time. And this time is not the market time. So if we go back, having an impact, yes, opening up the silos, yes, but how do we go to the end? How do we make progress in this? There are two questions, maybe we'll group them up. We have time to answers. Please, in a nutshell. Yeah, hello, I'm just I live in Aix, and I've attended the festival for years. I'm a musician also, but I'd like to say that there's a political argument with a view to the festival, to the opera. I think it's particularly true in the staging, beyond the music, emotion, and there's really a political message that could be appealing to the youth. Political message, generally speaking, equality, men, women, international commitment. I think it should be underlined, highlighted in the. If you talk about Carmen or the Beatles, that could be a bit dusty. I think they're more modern arguments to bring forth. Yes, just a comment I wanted to make. Yes, lady, hello, thank you very much for this high-quality debate. I'm the founder of Pax Musica, a non-profit. We accompany professional music. We found a refuge in France with major musicians, play the Institut du Monde Arabe and so on and so forth. And my question would be for Mrs. Koné. How do you see the role of non-profit organizations? Their role? Of course, there's the financial aspect, associations faced with that, but more on the artistic and societal standpoint. How do you see the relationship between your institution and associations? Is it a laboratory or relay? for the creation in general, you're saying? For creation. I was talking on the societal and social standpoint. I feel that the association is the incubator by excellence, of a lot of cultural and societal projects. That's how the most came alive, The Maîtrise Populaire was born from an associative initiative, and so the associations are essential for our reflections that we should have collectively. Do you think that culture or music can remain a space to overpass the political disruptions and polarization? We see that there are artists that can no longer perform on certain stages. So do you see this risk growing, or what do you do to make sure that culture remains a place that brings people together? We continue to welcome all forms of our cultural expression, and making sure that we avoid the inward-looking attitude. So the divan, our season is well known. So we are having the divan orchestra with Daryl Bamboin, with Palestinian and Israeli performers. So the very important event directed by Daniel Barenboim. So it's a space to go beyond the specificities. There is something like that in the opera. Is there a political message that you're conveying? Do you feel that responsibility, political responsibility in your actions? I think
always has been a very international art form. It's been about sharing ideas from country to country from its very inception. And I feel it's a very international community that makes opera and that comes to opera. And I think that in our world of increased polarization, I think we like coming to somewhere where we can listen to another, where we can sit together, even if we disagree with each other, even if we're coming from very different places. But the act of listening together is essential to our society, and it's almost disappeared, I'd say. And part of that is the new digital world and how separate we all feel.
On va être obligé de conclure.
Unfortunately, we have to conclude. Natasha, maybe as one word we didn't use is artificial intelligence. So it's also oncoming in cultural production. Is that a risk? Is that endangering cultural diversity? No. I think that the three speakers here with me are in a better position to answer. A lot of questions are asked around AI and the proportion it takes in creation, the room it's taking in the creativity process. It's a tool like many other fields that can be very useful, and that can be harnessed, but on which we have to handle with a lot of care. So a lot of question marks on platforms, algorithms, and authoring rights also, which is under discussion. We have to protect the artists. Okay, make sure we protect the artists. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I think thank you for taking part in this debate. And we're on time. Thank you for your contribution. Have a good end of. Enjoy the festival. Started with a big show, and for the years to come also, we'll be in Marseille on the 23rd at the Philharmonic for the next season, and we are waiting for the next economic publications by Natasha. So have a good